that an alien be provided notice of the charges against him, a hearing before an executive or administrative tribunal, and a fair opportunity to be heard," end quote, all of which...
A United States senator asked the same question 9 different times and never once got a straight answer. By the time you reach the end of this video, you will understand exactly why that silence was more revealing than any answer could have ever been. Stay with me, because what is actually at stake here goes far deeper than one hearing room.
For any federal agents who are watching this, remember that you swore an oath to support and defend the Constitution and the laws of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. This conduct that we're seeing does not hold up with that oath, and we are going to hold you accountable. Everyone that is involved in this absolute travesty and violation of justice. And I want to thank Representatives Chuy Garcia and Delia Ramirez, who helped me put this on, as well as Representatives Mary Gay Scanlon, Becca Ballant, Sidney Kamlager-Dove, and Jasmine Crockett for coming to Chicago, along with many other colleagues. This is not normal, and we should be standing up to actually uphold the laws of this country. I urge Republican colleagues to join us and vote no on this. Mr. Chairman, I also seek a unanimous consent.
Gentleman may make her request.
To enter into the record the following articles from ABC. Chicago's children are getting caught in the chaos of immigration crackdowns.
Without objection.
From The Independent, U.S. citizen 67 has ribs broken by Border Patrol agents after being dragged out of car while driving home into street they'd blocked off.
Without objection.
From ProPublica, I lost everything. Venezuelans were rounded up in a dramatic midnight raid but never charged with a crime.
Without objection.
From the Chicago Tribune, U.S. citizens racially profiled by immigration agents in Chicago, quote, "I felt like a piece of trash."
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
The lady yields back. Gentleman from, excuse me, from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to remind the committee that administrative removal is already on the books right now. All this law does is simply expand the categories under which an illegal alien can be deportable via administrative removal. In fact, administrative removal was used 13,000 times by President Obama, over 12,000 times under President Biden. Were those deportations a violation of due process?
Would the gentleman yield?
No, I will not. And if we want to talk about due process, as my colleagues would like to, where was the due process for Rachel Morin, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? Where was the due process for Kayla Hamilton, who was slaughtered by an illegal alien? What about Laken Riley or Jocelyn Nungary? Where was the due process for them? Where was the outrage when the last administration ushered into our communities Tren de Aragua gang members, MS-13 cartel members, and terrorists from around the world? I think that the American people can see that Democrats reserve their tears for illegal aliens who break our laws and victimize our communities. But if we want to talk about due process, let's talk about due process. Federal courts of appeals have routinely upheld this law's administrative removal procedures as they have existed for the last 30 years. In fact, every federal court of appeals to consider the constitutionality of the expedited removal procedures under Section 238 of the Immigration and Nationality Act has held that the statute comports with due process. Nearly 3 decades ago, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit held that, quote, "clearly the expedited statutory deportation scheme comports with the minimum requirements of due process pronounced by the Supreme Court." The Fifth Circuit outlined the due process requirements, quote, that an alien be provided notice of the charges against him, a hearing before an executive or administrative tribunal, and a fair opportunity to be heard, end quote, all of which this statute satisfies and did satisfy. As recently as this past July, the Fifth Circuit reiterated that holding, as have the U.S. Courts of Appeals for the 4th, 6th, 9th, 10th, and 11th Circuits. Democrats' fear-mongering contradicts the law, contravenes the text of the bill, and undermines efforts to ensure that dangerous illegal aliens can be quickly removed from the United States.
There is a moment in every congressional hearing when the mask slips, Not because someone says the wrong thing, but because someone refuses to say anything at all. What you just watched was one of those moments, and it deserves a serious, honest examination rather than partisan celebration from either side of the aisle. A sitting United States Senator asked a nominee a question that any first-year law student could answer in under 3 seconds. Do members of the Weaponization Working Group at the Department of Justice have to abide by the Justice Department manual? Yes or no? That is not a trick question. That is not a complex legal puzzle requiring careful deliberation. Every employee of a federal agency operates under that agency's established guidelines. The answer is so obvious that a high school civics student could provide it without hesitation. And yet, Colin McDonald, the nominee to lead the Fraud Enforcement Division, could not bring himself to say yes. 9 times. 9 separate attempts by the senator to extract a one-syllable answer. 9 elaborate non-responses designed to sound like engagement while delivering absolutely nothing. Now here's where I want to be precise, because precision matters in a conversation like this one. There are 2 separate questions worth examining here. The first is what the senator was actually trying to accomplish. The second is what the witness's refusal to answer actually reveals. On the first question, the senator was clearly building toward an argument that the Weaponization Working Group operated outside established Justice Department guidelines while investigating the previous administration's use of that same department. The implication being that the investigators themselves may have violated the rules they were tasked with enforcing. That is a legitimate oversight concern. Congressional oversight of executive branch agencies is not a partisan activity. It is a constitutional function, and senators on both sides of the aisle have both the right and the obligation to press nominees on these questions. But here is what made this exchange remarkable. A nominee who was completely innocent of any wrongdoing would have answered that question immediately and without hesitation. Yes, every Department of Justice employee operates under the Justice Manual. That answer costs nothing and closes the line of questioning immediately. The fact that McDonald refused to give that answer for 9 consecutive attempts is not a sign of legal caution. It is a sign that the answer, if given honestly, leads somewhere he does not want to go. That is the unmistakable logic of the moment. Now let's talk about what the Fraud Enforcement Division actually does and why this particular nomination carries enormous consequences regardless of which party you affiliate with. The Fraud Enforcement Division exists to investigate and prosecute schemes that misuse federal funds. We're talking about federal grant fraud, government contract fraud, and the complex financial arrangements that develop between government funding streams and the organizations that receive them. This is not abstract policy discussion. This is about billions of dollars of taxpayer money that moves through a system where accountability has historically been inconsistent at best. The Weaponization Working Group that McDonald was connected to was specifically tasked with examining how the previous administration used the Justice Department apparatus against political opponents. That is also a legitimate function. Every American, regardless of party affiliation, should want a Justice Department that is not being deployed as a political weapon. The entire credibility of federal law enforcement depends on that principle. Where things get complicated is when you combine those 2 areas, weaponization oversight and fraud enforcement, in the same conversation about the same nominee, because what emerges from that combination is a picture of an agency that is being asked to look simultaneously at how government power was abused and at how government money may have been misused. Those 2 investigations, if pursued aggressively and impartially, have the potential to be genuinely disruptive to the established Washington ecosystem. That ecosystem, to be completely honest with the people watching this, operates across party lines. There are members of both parties who have found creative ways to benefit from the flow of federal dollars through organizations, advocacy groups, and contractors who in turn support their political interests. This is not a new phenomenon, and it is not exclusive to one ideology. What changes from administration to administration is not the existence of the system, but who benefits most from it at any given moment. The senator's line of questioning was pointed directly at that nerve. Not because the questions themselves were devastating, but because the refusal to answer them was. When you watch a nominee refuse 9 times to confirm that his working group operated under basic ethical guidelines, you are watching someone protect information. The question is what that information is and who it implicates. The chairman's refusal to assist a senator in obtaining an answer is equally telling. A committee chairman who refuses to help a colleague obtain a basic factual answer from a nominee is not presiding over a hearing. He is running interference. That is not how oversight is supposed to function. What every American voter should take from this exchange is not a partisan conclusion about which side is right. What you should take from it is a simple and powerful principle. When someone refuses to answer a direct question in a public hearing, they are telling you something. They may not be saying it in words, but they are communicating it clearly through their behavior. Evasion is data. Refusal to answer is an answer. Silence in the face of a simple factual question is almost never innocent. The Fraud Enforcement Division, properly led and aggressively staffed, has a potential to follow money trails that no one in comfortable Washington circles wants followed. That makes the leadership of that division consequential in a way that far exceeds the typical agency appointment. It also makes a confirmation hearing for its leader a battleground where the stakes are much higher than they appear on the surface. That is what you were watching in that room, not a routine Senate hearing, not a standard back and forth between politicians performing for cameras. You were watching a fight over whether accountability will actually be allowed to function in the federal government. The nominee's silence told you where he stands. The chairman's refusal to intervene told you where he stands. And the senator's persistence through 9 consecutive non-answers told you that at least someone in that room understood what the exchange was really about. Whether the Fraud Enforcement Division ultimately becomes a genuine accountability mechanism or another captured institution that protects the powerful from the consequences that ordinary Americans face every day will depend on decisions made in rooms like that one. The people who make those decisions work for you. And moments like this one are exactly why paying attention matters.